I was around the age of 9, I believe, when I was first exposed to pornography, and it was at the home of a relative. I was one of those kids that liked to just rummage through the house and just go exploring, and it didn't matter whose house it was, so I would just go. And I remember being on one of my little explorations and opening a closet and going into that closet, and in the bottom of that closet was a box. And I was like, hey, well, I got a great box I can go explore through. And I started rummaging through that little box, and there were the pages of a discarded pornographic magazine in that box. Pulled out the intact part, started to thumb through it, and wow, there's pornography in it. I remember the glossy pages and the flesh colors on the pages. And there's a part of me that I was like, I knew this is not good. I don't think I'm supposed to be looking at this. There was a seed that was planted in that moment, and then there would be more exposures just like that. Again, innocent. I didn't go looking for it, right? I was just doing normal kid thing.
Sex addiction is kind of a bigger umbrella term, and pornography addiction is a specific part of that. So sex addiction would refer to an addictive relationship with any sort of sexual behavior, whether that is just compulsive sexuality, hookups, prostitutes, stuff like that, or pornography. And so I think pornography is kind of just a subset of the broader category of different types of sex addictions.
At some point, you're going to stumble upon, find, or maybe the pornography finds you in this country, and that was my first exposure, just randomly coming across it.
A child's brain isn't really set up to be able to conceptualize what all that is, and so what happens is the kid's brain gets a really big rush of excitatory chemicals without the understanding or context of what that is, what that means. But that can really kind of sink a hook inside of the kid, because it gives this really intense rush of pleasure that can lead the kid towards seeking that out again in the future. So it can very much set them up for a life of just kind of chasing that excitement.
So most kids today have devices, or they're learning on devices, and a lot of times that they actually come about this information or this material accidentally. So a lot of kids, and the average age of exposure is 8. All right, and I have a 12-year-old, so it's very scary when you think about these things. So when they come about this material, what tends to happen is when it's shock, but there's also curiosity. So when you blend the two, then it imprints their brain. They can't forget what they have seen because of the shock and the curiosity. So that's why it's important that we as parents have conversations, and that we are open with our children around sexuality and the dangers of the internet. So if they do accidentally come upon some type of pornography, that they're going to more likely go to their parents.
Because their mind is so concrete and exact of how they think, like, they don't think abstractly yet. They just literally don't have the development. So now what happens is you form these concrete ideas on relationships and sex at an age that you don't understand, but now you form a concrete foundation where this is what you think love is.
Particularly the immature brain thrives on novelty, something that's new. And if you're scrolling, something new comes up every 2 seconds. And the same thing is true of online pornography. It used to be you had to have a Playboy magazine to get your pornography, but now you just go on the internet, you just go on your phone. It's the thing you tell time on, it's the thing you call your mom on. You go on the same device, and you can have infinite opportunities and infinite novelty. You can look at a new image every 2 seconds now, or every 1 second, for free on the internet.
When it comes to addiction, it's often escalating. It's progressive. You start out with a little bit of it, and it's probably somewhat manageable. Like, you don't constantly crave it and so forth. But then the more that your tolerance builds up, right? So the more you continue to do and it's habitual, you need a little bit more of the the drug, if you will, or the content to really make you feel better.
Pornography addiction is very similar, if not almost exactly the same as drug addiction, with the exception that you're being addicted to naturally occurring opiates. We call it the dopaminergic system, or the part of the brain that produces the pleasure neurotransmitter. It's called dopamine. People can become addicted to their own naturally occurring dopamine when it is artificially stimulated. And so people become addicted to those high levels of dopamine, even though they're not taking a substance in from the outside.
To a point that where, you think about it when you wake up in the morning, and you're thinking about, when are the moments when I'm going to be alone so that I can consume it? I was a pastor for many years. I could be at my church office and, just diligently doing what a pastor's supposed to do, and then realize, hey, there's nobody else around. Well, let me go do this too, right? And so it's very subtle, but unless you address what's going on with you and the reason you're pursuing the pornography, you'll always find yourself drawn towards it. You'll always look for that escape. Because after a while, your brain sort of gets wired, kind of a one-track mind sort of thing. And so you can only go so long before you need that hit. You need something, you need that content to kind of get you through. And I lived that way for years.
Porn and a lot of our culture at large, it dehumanizes people. So porn is about the consumption of another human being, right? So I'm looking at you, usually because they want to masturbate and have an orgasm and really relieve themselves, get rid of some anxiety or whatever's going on. Well, the more I get into that world, the more I just look at this woman or whatever you're looking at, I see her less and less as a human and more as an object that I can demand what I want.
There's not a pornographic website out there that will not help you to feel accepted and known and loved. All right? That's the power of it. You're never rejected by pornography. It welcomes you.
Typically, people stay within their flavor of their ice cream is what I'll say. But atypical means it's not typical, but sometimes it can get to illegal activities where people will find themselves looking at child porn, or they're looking at what we call bestiality, where there are people having sex with animals, these types of things. So the more that they're looking at porn, and let's just say they're looking at normal heterosexual porn, they become desensitized to it. So they need more extreme, and they can look at porn for hours and it doesn't affect them. So then they start finding themselves in these dark spaces.
Sometimes there's violence. Sometimes there's BDSM where people are getting tied up and whipped, abused, and whatever. So now what happens when you no longer can satiate that dopamine hit you need in your mind to feel okay? Now I'm gonna go out in public and I'm gonna pursue a prostitute or a call girl.
And then the worst case that we've probably seen in our offices was an individual that actually went so far because of the deep shame and self-esteem that he would be what we would call cruising for roadkill. And he would find himself masturbating to roadkill.
Would you say anything like this to a loved one? Would you treat anyone that you actually cared for as a human like this? The answer is no, right?
It created a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, because I didn't want to get caught. So I was paranoid, like incredible paranoia around, did somebody see me? Did somebody get on my computer and find it? Does somebody know? But again, probably the most significant thing was just a distance and a lack of the ability to connect and have a level of just emotional intimacy and connection with people.
And then we also see sometimes with our teens, it's delaying relationship and it's delaying real sexual experiences because they are meeting this need in other places. So it creates a decrease in actually wanting to pursue a female or their desire of sexuality.
It creates a double life too, right? With pornography, there's no visible evidence that anybody's struggling, right? And so I could present well. I knew all the right things to say, how to say it. I could put on a happy face and make everybody think everything was okay. As a spiritual leader, I could say all the right things and pray. And I remember it for me being a very kind of spiritual thing for me. I had a lot of guilt, and I was concerned that God didn't love me anymore because of some of the stuff that I was thinking about and the things that I had seen. That was devastating. Just the fear, the paranoia, the double life, the not being true to who people think you are. You have a good reputation. People think well of you, but you're sitting there going, you don't really know me. When my wife found out, I had been on kind of a downward spiral, consuming more pornography more often, covering my tracks on the computer, erasing the history, and trying to make sure that nobody saw anything. But there's apparently a day where she got on the computer after me, and she clicked on the drop-down menu, the URL, where you type in the URL and saw the websites where I had been. And that just really, that shocked her, and that really broke her heart, and she was confused. And so it took her another day or so before she confronted me about it. But I'll never forget this. We were about to get in bed, to turn in for the night, and she just said, "Hey, we need to talk." And she said, "We need to talk," in the way that, very seriously. And I knew, I could tell something was off. And then again, a big part of me was like, "Oh no, this is..." And sure enough, she said, "I was on the computer today, and this is what I saw. And is that you? Were you looking at those things?" And I said, and it was the first time I'd ever been caught, and she was the first person to ever find out. And I said, "Yes, that was me." And I, started to cry, and I said, "This has been the thing that's hounded my soul for years, since I was a kid." I was sorry to cause her pain, but I still wasn't at a point where I was ready to do the difficult work to change. I continued to look, and I continued to disappoint her. And we would come back to these moments of, her discovering and being hurt again and again, until it got to a point where she had decided that she just can't live that way anymore. And she screamed through her tears. She said, "Do you want to lose this?" And that was, that was pretty significant, because I didn't want to lose my kids. And
so when a spouse finds out that their partner has been using pornography, often it's in secret and they've hidden from them, and so they really feel a sense of betrayal. It goes outside of what they agreed to when they got married and what the context of their relationship is, and the person feels very betrayed. They feel shocked. They can have a sense of PTSD. They can have hypervigilance, like results of PTSD, where they're searching and trying to find out if there's more. They can feel a lack of sense of self and sort of shame, and they do a lot of comparison of why their partner would go that route. And then they get angry and resentful of the fact that the person hid this from them.
My wife absolutely felt it was the same betrayal as if I had been in a physical affair with someone else, like with a person. And the devastation and the pain and the hurt was very, very real.
Betrayal trauma, that the people in the family are going to feel profoundly betrayed by the individual that was involved with pornography. It will shake the foundations of their relationship with that person, because that person is not who they thought they were. And it will shake them on the most fundamental level.
So God sort of whispered to me, just tell someone, talk to someone about your problem. You have a problem, go talk to somebody. And I knew there was one person I could call as a mentor and a friend and a pastor. And so I called them up and I said, I need you to come to my house. I need to talk to you right now. He came to my house, and there in the living room of my home, I finally confessed. I'd never told anyone. I'd been found out by my wife, so I was forced to tell. but I'd never just opened up and told someone about my problem. And I said, I've been carrying this for years. I just need help. And he was he's a great friend and a mentor, and said, I'm with you, I'll help you, I'll hold confidentiality, and you get the help. And so that was the beginning of the end of the addiction and a move towards sobriety. Because my main addiction was, internet and being on the computer and looking at pornography that way, I just had new boundaries around the computer. So I was never alone with the computer. Whenever I was on my laptop, it was out in a public space. Everybody could see it. My wife could see it. Anybody could walk by and see what I was looking at on it.
I have never seen a person, first of all, recover from active pornography addiction without a program. They have to have some structure in place that takes all the energy that they were putting into the addiction and now puts it into the recovery. So the program's going to look different depending on the person, but usually it involves counseling, coaching, some kind of accountability partner, some kind of group work, whether it be Celebrate Recovery or 12-step work, some kind of religious involvement where you're studying the Bible, attending church, and then just ongoing accountability with the people you're close to.
There was just less time connected to the internet, less time online, more time focused on talking to real people, trying to nurture real relationships. And there was time spent doing things that help other people address the same issue, because I'm convinced that where there's this hiddenness and this secret, especially around pornography, then it has great strength. So you gotta bring it out into the light, into the open, and address it, and it loses its power.
They have to have those things in place to some degree for the rest of life's journey, often, depending on how bad the addiction was. So that doesn't mean that your whole life is monopolized by it forever, but don't we recognize that with alcohol addiction, that once people are addicted, they have those neural pathways that have been carved out in their brain, and they're always going to be there until, I believe that God is going to transform us physically and our brains physically when we're made new in the world to come. But, until then, we're always going to have this history, and it will have embedded itself, so to speak, in our brains. So we have to have some structures in place and some very firm boundaries and some accountability, I think, for the rest of our lives.
What do I tell a young person? I would say if you want to not compromise your future, then pay attention now. Be mindful of things now. I think relationship pain is some of the deepest pain ever. So if I'm talking to a young person, I'm going to say, man, I want your relationships to be all that they can be. And pornography is going to affect the way that you view your spouse. It just is. It's going to affect the way that you view people and relate to people. And in fact, it very well may prevent you from being as close to the person you want to get close to.
And it will take a lot of time to heal that rupture, that wound, and it will take a lot of that individual who was involved with pornography giving evidence to the people he betrayed or she betrayed of recovery and accountability in place.
If you're a young guy and you're marrying a young girl, your expectations around sex and what happens in the bedroom is going to be affected dramatically if you're consuming pornography. Pornography is shaping the way you think right now about sex, and healthy and appropriate and good sex.
There's a whole organization called Porn is the New Drug, and a number of different organizations that are really campaigning against pornography as a social ill that there should be restrictions on and laws containing. It's not just a matter of free speech when vulnerable populations are involved. You're as sick as your secrets, and what you bury, you marry. You have to tell someone. I would say, first of all, God, but secondly, a trusted human being or maybe other human beings to be able to start your recovery program.
I think what I would encourage people to think about again is kind of this, what kind of life do I want? Do I want a life that's fulfilling and a life that's meaningful and a life that has legitimate, connection and intimacy and love? And I think everyone wants that. You know, I think everyone wants to be close to their spouse, their partner, their friends. And if pornography presents a barrier to that, I want to avoid that. Anything that's going to undermine my relationships and being connected to other people, I definitely don't want.